Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit. Here you got Eric, the host, and you got Scott Medlin. Scott Medlin is joining us from the East Coast, so thank you for being with us today, man.
Oh, my honor, Eric. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my brief intro is Scott entered, I'll say, the life of service clearly as a U.S. Marine. So thank you very much for your service, man, in that regard. And then also, is it 15 years as a law enforcement officer?
Yeah, just shy of it.
Okay. And then, and how long have you been doing all the things you're doing? You know, as far as like creating content, speaking, you're talking about resilience, you're talking about wellness.
Yeah, I started that back in August of 2020 after I left full-time law enforcement, and then I went down to part-time law enforcement. But August of 2020 was when this journey started, and let's see, it's been 2 years now that I've actually started the journey of speaking in person, literally from coast to coast.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, you run Code 10 Mindset. Can you tell us a little bit about where that name came from? I've been following you for a while, so it's really good to get connected and kind of dive into the origin story here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is the 10 code mindset, but I
Oh
do get
man,
that a lot. No, it's all good. I get people to say code 10 because I guess, anyway.
yeah,
But I came up with it because, well, in my opinion, if you say 10 code, well, that resonates with police because most agencies still talk in 10 code. So it catches the attention. Well, this must be police oriented, to which it primarily is. And then mindset, in the sense of I want us to be able to have good communication with ourselves, thus elevate our mindset. And mindset is one of those things where I don't really believe still to this day that it's taught overall throughout policing. I mean,
mm,
we have the warrior mindset and the survival mindset, like get home to your family safe and sound, that kind of thing. But do we really focus on victor mindset, growth mindset? I don't think so. And I really do believe I know through evidence and numbers and statistics that the things I present about, solution oriented, do in fact increase people's physical health, thus their mental health, but at the same time, the other way around, things that can improve their mental health, thus relieving tension on the body as well. That's what the 10 code mindset's all about. Just how can we battle this stress, build our mindset, but yet start thriving at the same time and not living in survival mode a lot.
yeah. I love that intention because it's something that I think a lot of people be like, oh yeah, mindset, yeah, cool, like good attitude and trying to be positive on these things. But like, no, you have to stretch it and you have to train it just like a muscle, and you have to be intentional. I did a post a while back and it was essentially just trying to ask people to pay attention to what they're paying attention to, right? Like,
Yeah.
mind what's on your mind, and unless you actually take a step back or you just take a pause, you're just kind of absorbed into life. And I think that's something that a lot of first responders can resonate with, between work and what you squeeze in for your family time, and then what crumbs you leave for your personal life or health. So yeah, could you tell me a little bit more about how that evolved for you and the recognition of that?
Well, I didn't know at the very beginning when I started in law enforcement, heck, even in the Marines, if I would have been told these three things: your brain seeks to conserve energy all the time, your brain's not wired to make you happy, and your brain seeks out the negative. Now, these are all innate wirings and default settings of the brain, all in an effort to help protect you and help you survive. Therefore, you have to work on your mindset if you want to take your life to the next level, or not be so uh, focused in on what you need to. I mean, sometimes in the case of police, literally fight against to survive. I- It's just that should be common knowledge in an industry where we're facing the threat of suicide. At least 20% of police officers nationwide facing a mental health issue of some sort. That should be common knowledge, and it should be really hammered home, for lack of a better phrase, to take that action. And this is all because I was one of those who said three damaging words many times throughout my career: I am fine. And I wasn't fine. And it got to a point where I had to change. I had to uh, live life a different way, or else, I mean, me and my wife, we were just growing apart, and something had to change. So I did it out of a reactive state, and I learned so much about mental health and mindset. But my thing is, there's proactive policing. Police need to be just as enthusiastic and proactive with their mindset as well. And it's nothing that takes too much time. It's just little simple steps over time that have a compounding effect. It really does. And it's worth it, every single bit of it.
Yeah, I love that. Was there a significant wake up call, or is it for some it's the death by a thousand cuts, or the straw that breaks the camel's back? Some people it's an ultimatum. Or what brought you and your wife together to recognize that and attack that, as far as what you needed and what the two of you needed?
Yeah, it was the night we spent the night in separate beds. And we talked about it in the documentary. Is there something going on at home? I mean, we came out in the open about that, and that night I slept in a different room. I didn't get a wholesome night of sleep, obviously, but every
No.
2 to 3 hours I woke up, and I just thought, we can't keep going down this road. And the damage has been done because I was the one that would sign up for off-duty jobs, even though we financially weren't dependent on it. To which we know
Mm,
police should never sign up for some or budget off-duty money in their budget anyway. But I just loved being a cop, so I would sign up for off-duty jobs, and there was no need for that. It was other things like I would come home, and from particularly when I was on the canine unit, I had a long, frustrating day. Well, guess who got to hear the griping and the complaining about it? My wife did, and she said, for that canine job being your dream job, you sure did complain a lot. But
man.
I didn't have that self awareness
Hmm.
because once again, I'm fine, right? And but that night, it changed everything. And I remember talking to my supervisor, and I said, I don't think I'm going to be staying on patrol much longer. I don't think I'm going to be staying in police work any much longer. I don't know what to do, but I can't keep going down this road because I'm not going to lose my family. I just can't. And of course, some of the officers were giving me a hard time, saying, well, we know who runs the household. You knew what you were getting into when you started as a police officer. You had kids, and you knew you were a cop. Okay, I knew all that, but you really can't. You really don't know what to expect until you're in it. And then, yeah, it can be overwhelming, and it got overwhelming for us, and things had to change. So, like I said in the beginning, I changed because I had to. It was a reactive state. If I would have been proactive, because I would have known how to been proactive about mindset and health and stuff like that, who knows? Things might would have worked out differently. Who knows?
Yeah, I love the recognition. And just to dial it back a little bit, uh, one, kudos to you and your wife for sharing the story, because it's something that we know, and I venture to guess the majority of people that are taking the time to listen to a podcast like mine, or people like us speak, are open to the fact that this is happening on a huge scale, and there's very few people that are speaking to it. Not everyone needs to, but I just appreciate the fact that there are people that do that, because it does take a lot of courage to share a story and then recognize how many people that could help, right? There's going to be similarities with so many folks' experiences, and they don't even have to be in law enforcement or even first responder work to have work-life imbalance and relational issues. Like that is that's a common thing, but there's so much that can be done. And I love the recognition that you had, which was that, yeah, things change and that's okay. And you also recognize, hey, maybe if I had different healthy practices, like maybe I'd still be a cop. I don't know. And I
Hmm.
think that there's an adaptability and then a flexibility that's empowering and responsible to recognize, is that situation changes, man. And you could, any cop listening could recognize how much we do this in the job, right? You show up to a dispute call, and then you're kind of amped up. You don't know what's going to happen. It comes in as a domestic. There might be a weapon implied or mentioned, and then it's actually just kind of a bickering fest between a couple neighbors. And you power down, right? You adapt. Or similarly, you have a hostage rescue situation, and you're able to evacuate a couple people, and now it's a barricade, and you back up. You let it level out. You surround and just contain, and the pressure's way lower. But I think that we can look at a job that we know so well and we know so intimately, and then recognize, hey, like, stuff just happens, and you're not the same person as when you came in, and the situation and the traumas you've experienced and the stress you've experienced, it doesn't leave you the same, right? It's not apples to apples, and I think it's really important that people recognize that.
Yeah, man. Wow, you hit the nail on the head on so many levels there. And then also, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's not like a guaranteed sentence that you're going to get a mental health issue because you work in law enforcement. And
Yeah, yeah.
I have to be careful of that myself when I'm out there speaking the 10 code mindset. If I'm not careful, I'll make it seem like you're going to face something huge, but that's not the case. Many people go through the job relatively unscathed. However, we're all human. And for any cop that says I've worked this many years and that or however long and nothing's ever bothered me, I don't know if I can trust you.
Hmm.
uh, it's just a matter of, are you the type that whenever something does happen, are you going to be like me and say I'm fine because you don't know any different and you're not aware of certain signs and symptoms that you should have been aware about? Or are there those healthy coping mechanisms in place, which are good, but let's keep growing as people. We're never going to be perfect. Um, and yeah, that's a big one. Just to realize we're human. Bottom line. So we got to keep working on ourselves. And I found that when I was particularly on patrol, a lot of cops were very good at compartmentalizing. Like
Yeah.
they would either have a lot going on in their professional career, they were really stressed out at work, but at home they didn't bring it home. But at the same time, some had a lot going on at home and they didn't bring it to work. And they were all smiling and just having a great. And you would have never known that anything was going on back at home. Uh, be- and the some of the officers were at these domestics giving advice that they themselves weren't adhering to back at their house.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
like you're going through a divorce right now, and look at what you're telling this married couple who called 911 for help. It's just yeah, that's what I'm saying. You never know, and everyone's going to be different through it. But law enforcement definitely is more of a risk for mental health and stress and all that. So we need to be equipped, and certain things need to be taught and more mainstream knowledge, in addition to what an officer does personally for themselves anyway.
Yeah, I love the no, you're absolutely right. We talk about mindset, and that's the crux of what we're talking about today, where we can take ownership and we can build these healthy thought patterns, these healthy routines, healthy practices to make ourselves more resilient. At the same time, we don't want to say, hey, like you're gonna be damaged and you're gonna face this, insurmountable amount of trauma. No, like we're gonna face a lot, but how much we can take ownership of, how much we can build and foster that growth and that durability, I suppose, that's gonna help you navigate it. And we definitely can't control all the calls that we go to and how we process those, right? A lot of cops are good at compartmentalizing. That's important to a degree, right?
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to get through day to day. And at first, I was kind of thrown back when I heard that, like, oh, compartmentalizing is good. And then a lot of MHPs, they break it down like, yeah, I mean, if you didn't compartmentalize and you're a caring, empathetic person, then if you show up to a call with a kid in the back seat with a broken arm, you're gonna see your kid, you're gonna see your cousin, you're gonna see all these things, and you're gonna have a reaction. Like you're going to have a reaction, but you need to keep it relatively minimal to do the commission of your job. And so it makes sense in that way. But we got to be able to metabolize it and process it in healthy ways later, right? Not just bottle it up, not just sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, I think the culture of law enforcement still to this day, yeah, I think there's a shift and there's definitely momentum, so far as like going towards resources and it's okay to not be okay, that kind of phrase. Um, but sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You're good.
Anyway, it's well, the culture doesn't help, in my opinion, because heaven forbid you are upset about something. Even on an individual level, some cops say to themselves, I no this I shouldn't be bothered by this. Why am I bothered by this? And then therefore you just kind of bury it, and there's that compartmentalizing to an unhealthy level. But at the same time, what are some of the rules of thumb for career survival in law enforcement? Have friends outside of the profession. Don't bring the job home. Have a hobby outside of the job. Okay, all these things are pretty much being done by a lot of police officers, yet we still are facing just very concerning numbers of
Yeah.
mental health conditions and suicide threat. And the job is not to blame in and of itself, but we just know we have to be aware of the fact that it elevates the risk of something going on. So there needs to be more of a change, in my opinion, because like I said, a lot of these officers are already doing these universal rules of thumb for career survival, but we clearly need to do a lot more. And on the individual level, I'm one of those that says if it's okay to leave a crime scene, say particularly where a child was a victim, and someone says, "Hey, how you doing?" Rather than saying, "I'm fine," just say, "That was sad to see." At
Mm,
least you acknowledged it, and that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Acknowledgement is huge, and I think
Hmm.
in the whole conversation that could be a theme. If we had something that I already suspect we're early in the conversation, but I think if you had something that I want people to take away from this, it's acknowledgement, right? Acknowledge where
Yeah.
you're at. Acknowledge where you're at with your career. Acknowledge where your family's at, right? And like where you are, maybe it's not the best place, but we can climb up from that, right? We can take these skills and we can work at them. And so with that, you were just talking about having friends outside of law enforcement, having hobbies, other senses and connections of purpose and community. Let's talk about that. You have pretty, itemized um, in your, I suppose, package like an importance to recognize how to balance that warrior uh, mindset and being a human. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the human side just goes back to acknowledgement, saying like, I am sad, I am upset. Oh my gosh, I've noticed people are telling me that I don't enjoy the things I used to enjoy. It's all part of being human. But at the same time, you could be doing perfectly fine, but you don't want to settle for that. There's always something more we could do better. There's always something we could learn, a book you can read to continuously grow as a person. Because what's the saying? When a plant is done growing, what happens to it? It dies. We are essentially no different as humans, and you won't physically be buried in the ground, but it's not like you're living. You're just existing. And I think that's more of a risk in law enforcement because it's the survive the shift, survive the call. And
Mm,
then our brains are built for survival, as I said earlier. We have to be careful about that. So, therefore, just acknowledge how you're doing. Admit you're a human. It's okay.
yeah, I mean, there is that aspect where you said, hey, maybe you're not going to literally die, but maybe you do because look at the stats of recently retired law enforcement officers. Like when the national trends is just a handful of years after retirement, after a full career, and cops aren't living very long, right? Firefighters
Well,
aren't
that's
living
true.
very long,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that is
so
true. Chronic stress will create disease and destroy your body. To which I am not immune to this stuff, by the way, because of the stress I encountered during my law enforcement career and didn't cope with the right way. Oh yeah, I've got some health issues to this day. I still have to manage. So yeah, it's nobody's immune by
yeah,
any means. But I'm glad you brought that up. But that's also one of those things where is the officer in denial? Like, okay, that's just a statistic for everybody else. It won't happen to me,
mm-hmm,
that kind of thing. But it's like no officer goes into work and thinks, well, there's no need for me to be careful walking up to that car on the traffic stop because statistically speaking, it, chances are I'll be okay. So I don't need to be safe. But yet you start talking about personal development, personal growth, mental health with police officers, and it's I'm fine. No. you know,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, statistically speaking, you are more of a threat to yourself, and it's just something where we need to acknowledge we're human, and then stay aware, really be aware of how you're doing so, because there can be internal risks and internal threats going on within your mind and your body, and that's where I believe education is huge because a lot of police officers walk around and know that they're aware of their surroundings. Are they just aware or are they exhibiting hypervigilance, which thus
mm,
is firing off stress chemicals, which thus is not good for your body at all? It's really complex.
yeah. No, there's a lot of layers that we can connect because as you're talking about the example of a traffic stop, we all recognize in ourselves and our peers the slippery slope of complacency, right? Where
Hmm.
when you're out of academy or even in academy, right, like you think that like eight ninjas are going to jump out of the car and you're ready, right? Like you're ready.
Right.
And then the instructors are probably laughing because, being in a
Right.
trainer role or an instructor role, like we know what that looks like too. Um, Especially like a shoot house or like force on force, right? You see how
Right.
different people change when they are anticipating something coming at them. Um,
Yep.
but we all know that after so many times, like we shortcut things and we do this. And I wonder, it, thinking about that model, I wonder if there's a translation there with how we conduct our lives, right? We're being complacent. We're going through the motions, and a lot of that's probably just mental, emotional bandwidth that we're lacking because we're just so drained. But if we're not taking the steps, as you recognize and you point out, to grow, then we're getting stagnant, and then you are inevitably dying, right? Like, if you're not constantly learning and challenging yourself in some new way, in an uncomfortable way, and that might be get uncomfortable with life outside of law enforcement. And that is super scary for a lot of people, whether they're early in their career or they're late in their career. Like, they're just holding on because they don't want to be that statistic that loses purpose and loses community and loses identity. Um, so yeah, this is something somewhere where my mind went, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, that's a huge one because I've went through that. When I've had that night apart from my wife, and I realized I can't stay on the canine unit, something has to change. I put in my resignation with the canine unit because I called a friend of mine right before it. I called a friend of mine. I said, "Am I doing the right thing? I still don't know what to do, but I'm leaning towards this." He said, "Scott, your job is earthly, your wife is godly." So that was the seal the deal statement right there when
Wow,
I heard
yeah.
that, and so I turned in my resignation, and the PD was upset about it, obviously, but they figured it out where I could work in the schools and I could stay at the department. I was grateful for that. I really was. But when I turned in my dog to another person, I was devastated. And
How
then
long
for
were you with your dog?
3.5 years,
Oh
and
yeah.
then for let's see, for a year, about a year, I tremendously battled an identity loss. I mean, big time. I would show up for those students as best I could, and I would smile, I would mentor them, and I would enforce the laws and protect the campus when I had to. But you talk about like you never know what someone's battling on the inside. I mean, I could not stop thinking about my dog. I could not stop thinking about being out. Like, I'm supposed to be out there with my patrol team. I'm supposed to be out there catching people. And I sat on a perimeter one time when it came up when the handler that was working my former dog was tracking, looking for the guy, and I'm on the perimeter when I know I used to work with that dog.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it was awful for me. But I had to reach out for help again. So I went back to the neurolinguistic programming doctor who had helped me through post traumatic stress disorder. And he said, Scott, you're living in the past. You are living in the past. He said, you have got to realize that you're not a canine officer anymore. And basically, he just, we kind of detached the experience away from we detached the emotions away from the experience. And then we made a plan for how to move forward. But what was revealed was the identity piece. And my thing is, I think every person in the police academy, or rookie school, whatever it's called, wherever you're located, should be taught that you are never a police officer. You work as a police officer. And I love the phrase, we do what we do because of who we are. You're not who you are because of what you do.
Hmm.
If you base your entire identity on being a police officer, when you leave, you're going to feel like there is no purpose, there is no passion, and you're worthless. That could not be further from the truth. You have purpose, you have passion. Yes, you might have to find it, but there's a reason you're on this earth, and there's reasons and plenty of opportunities outside of law enforcement. You've got to embrace that because if you don't embrace it now, you can't wait for retirement or whenever you just have to leave the profession, like I did for family reasons, and wait to figure it out. It won't happen. So be proactive. There's proactive policing. Be proactive with yourself as well. Now, if you haven't figured it out, I could talk about this all day. So you
I
I
love it,
didn't want to
man.
ramble too
No,
long.
no, you're fantastic, and it is so powerful. I think that's an increasing message. It's been, when this airs, it'll be a theme that avid listeners are hearing, whether it's I'm talking to a retired cop or someone close to, or MHPs that are talking about this identity component because it is so huge, even to the point where I'm recognizing like I have work to do in that regard because a number of years ago, maybe shoot, handful of years ago, maybe before I was even a dad, right? So it was more of my life because I'm very proud to be a dad, and that's a big part of my identity. But
Hmm.
I was talking about what if life goes a certain way, or what if I have to leave law enforcement, or what if I step away, if something happens, all these kinds of hypotheticals that sometimes I do. My wife is like, I think that it's going to be a lot harder for you than you make it out to be. I was like, what are you talking about? And I was kind of pointing at these like archetypical, like, Uber SWAT guys and, the guys, the archetypes of cops that quote unquote can't turn it off. I'm like, I can sit with my back to the door. I don't carry like 18 guns, and I don't have like 30 med pouches in my personal car, and I don't wear all Oakley everything, and just kind of making these jokes. And she's just like, you think about this all the dang time. And those before I was doing all this like social media and trying to have conversations in the larger first responder community. And so now it has permeated into a very large part of my life and my off duty time. But all to say, yeah, it does creep up in some ways. It's amazing ways, right? Because you are invested in this larger sense of community in first responder work, but then also like to be an effective first responder, you have to care deeply about the capital C community, like the everybody out there, right? Um, but I say that all to say that I'm reminded of conversations that I had a lot of times coming out of recruiting recently. You have all these men and women that are they're very idealistic in all the awesome ways, right? And when I ask them, why do you want to become a cop, what have you, a lot of times it's like, oh, I want to help people. But my general response would be, okay, tell me more, because there's a million ways you can help people.
Yes.
And you're probably helping, like, I'm getting to know you. It sounds like you're helping people a lot of ways. And I'm not trying to push them away. I'm just trying to help them recognize two things. One is that you have to need to help people in a specific way to make sure that this is the right fit. But then beyond that, this is not your only entry point into helping people in really extreme ways, like teaching, counseling, social work, you know, all these things, right? But I think that the reason why I wanted to bring that up is the connection to our piece, even having a handful of years or more in the industry. It's so hard for us to conceptualize our value because we get so good at this and we do so many boots on the ground, hands on things affecting these really critically dangerous or impactful situations that it is really hard. It's kind of jarring to the conscience if you don't practice that and make sure that there are boundaries with it.
Yeah, and we talked about awareness so far as signs of internal risks and internal threats going on within the mind and the body, particularly when it comes to our brain health. We we have to be aware also of what we're good at, because when you get out of law enforcement, you can take so much of what you learn in the profession and apply it in other career fields. I mean, think about all the times that you've intentionally tried to de-escalate someone, try to talk someone out of a fight. Okay, you were selling them. You were you were unintentionally making a sales pitch in a way for them not to fight. You can take sales to the private market, or corporate or wherever. Because when I was looking for jobs outside of law enforcement, or when I realized I was going to have to leave, I remember speaking to an alarm company sales manager, and she said, "I have a ton of former cops because they talk to people, they
Yeah,
get it," and
yeah,
it was just communication. That's like we just had to think about this kind of stuff, and well, I mean, like me, I realized that whenever I spoke to groups at community events, I really enjoyed it. Well, like I like the speaking part. That's why I speak to cops now. And I missed the job so much that I said, no, I want to work with law enforcement. I can't work in law enforcement anymore. Let me work with law enforcement. So I did. I just reframed my way of thinking about it, and it helped a lot. But don't get me wrong, I miss it a lot. There's no job like it. But another thing that I think police have to be careful, particularly at smaller departments, when you resign or retire, what do they get? What do they take from you? Okay, they might give you a retire ceremonial badge, but your ID card is taken. Like you can't scan your way back into the building, and you've been going to this place and they say we're family. Like you literally can't get in unless someone lets you in. It's just the department will move on without you.
yeah,
And as my friend Ernie Stevens says, he's a retired San Antonio police officer. I love how he says you can love the job, but the job will never love you back. The
yeah.
department's the same way. They will move on. And I think if officers embrace that fact, then they'll be maybe not forced, but there's the incentive to look more into who you are as a person and what talents and strengths you have that you can contribute to society and continue with that servant's heart in something outside of law enforcement.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. It's the uncomfortable, hard truth we do have to face where is it more than a job? Sure. Is it a lifestyle? Oftentimes, yeah.
Hmm.
And we can talk about the right balance for different people and how that has a creep in one direction or the other. But at the end of the day, it is a profession, right? And we may or may not have a choice of whether we're still in it. right? Whether we do 2 or 20 years, something can happen off duty where it's just not in the cards anymore. And so that's I think it's humbling, and I think it's healthy to recognize that. But let's talk about that notion of family, because this is something that I've gotten a lot of feedback from, and people send me articles and this and that, right? Or they tell me some of their woes from whatever agency they're from. But that is a contention point when we talk about this industry being a family. I think there's a lot of familial aspects to the culture, to the profession, and maybe in your own work groups, maybe your unit, all these things. But when we call the department a family, that can create some really unfair expectations both ways. And it makes it a lot harder when you recognize, yeah, I mean, it is an organization, and you hear all these stories and all these anecdotes where someone's like, well, the department doesn't care, and the agency doesn't care, and we're supposed to be family. And my thing is, you're right. The agency department doesn't care because they don't have feelings. Like, it's an organization, right? There's people that make it up, and I think that's important to discern. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts on that, especially as you have had that experience, and you're talking about that kind of experience where someone exits out, they retire, they resign, and now their quote unquote family is not an open door where they can just access and pop in anytime they want.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the department will move on without you. Crime will continue even after you live or
Mm-hmm.
leave. Sorry.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you might have been that cop that really did a great job helping to, I don't know, eradicate certain crime in certain areas. But whatever, it's just crime's going to happen.
Keeps
You
going.
can't.
Yeah.
You're not going to save the world, but you'll find family within the department. I know there's a handful of officers I can call right now, and it's going to be like no time in between. We're very good friends. We had each other's back when crap hit the fan. But yeah, to put this expectation on the department itself to be a family, it's just not it's just not a healthy perspective in my opinion, particularly at any place where they try to preach that. And I've heard higher ups say that we are family here, but yet, okay, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but everyone in your family, you know who they are, you know what they're doing, and you're paying attention to what they're doing, and they're paying attention to you.
Yeah.
Some of the higher ups that I said we're family, they didn't even know what I did during the day. Like they don't even know what I was doing, but yet they'd be the first ones to say, "Thank you for all you do." I'm like, "What? You don't know what I've been doing."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I literally could have been out there doing nothing, and you would have said, "Thank you for all you do."
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
hard.
not. It really is. I just don't. I'm not on board anymore with the family notion. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a culture of welcoming
Mm-hmm.
and brother and sisterhood and support, but family's a bit extreme in my opinion,
Yeah.
particularly at agencies now where you're seeing a very high turnaround. Officers stay for a year or two and then they're gone. I
Yeah.
mean, it like when I left the department where I worked, and I have no ill will towards that department at all. If the planets were to align and the family situation worked out, I still would have been there. But it wasn't as hard to leave because I didn't know a lot of the officers. I was there for a little over 12 years, and I think, if my math serves me right, but I would go into the PD. I'm like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? But they're looking at me, a 10 plus year veteran. Who are
Yeah.
you? And I'm
Yeah.
like, this isn't family.
It's such a thing. No, it's such a
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, I mean, are there people that I've worked with or worked for, whether they're still in my department right now or whether they've left, are there people that I would do more for them than a lot of my close friends? Absolutely, right? Are there
Hmm.
people that I would do more for than some of my family, my actual family and extended family? Yes. Like, I care so deeply about so many people, but for all the reasons you stated, right, man? Like, it's not a word I use, especially as a leader. It's not part of my brand as far as how I want to engage the team. And I use the word team. Like, it is
Yeah.
literally that. I want to bring a lot of the points you're talking about. I want to support open communication. I want to support trust. I want to support unity and alignment and supporting each other, like peer support, wellness, all these critical things that do affect personal lives and families. But I'm gonna have that divide where I'm like, hey, I'm not gonna try to pretend to be something like as far as family. let me know what I can do as your boss to support you and your family, absolutely. Like I want to do that. I want the agency to have a role in that if you allow it, if you open that door, right? So I think the discernment's important. And again, it comes down to expectations because just like you said, hey man, like you don't even know me. How can you be calling me family? Because then it creates again, it there's a healthy, non-cynical way to say, hey, it's my workplace. And there's a lot of people I give it all, right? I give it all for my partner. Like, and literally our job might require it. It's healthy to be able to recognize that, but not say, hey, it's this other dynamic that needs to be important, right? Because even going back to our earlier conversations, right, when you're having these critical, difficult discussions with your wife, as you said, what's earthly versus godly, and like my translation of that is, hey, like I made a commitment to my wife, right? I I set myself out and we made vows to be together and love each other unconditionally. I took an oath to support, the laws and my badge and what it represents. But there was no, hey man, like you need to do 30 plus years. There was none of that. It was like, hey, while you're here, you will uphold yourself and your character and the values of this department and the city to the best of your degree and the laws, say it forth before you through the state of Washington, all that and federal and on, right? But like that is conditional because if I decide to step away or they say, hey, no, thank you, Eric, like thanks for your time, I still have my life to live, right? I still have
Yeah.
my own personal values that I have to live by, and one of those is commitment to my wife. And so I think that that's really important when just to go back to kind of this work life balance. So many people are strained in their relationships, and they feel like it's just getting worse and worse, or just maintaining this hard place. But again, I really appreciate the work you do and the conversations you have because we got to look at what we are at the end of the day, and it is being moms and dads and family members to our actual family.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think also if someone embraces the PD as their family, that really doesn't help the identity piece either. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you got so wrapped up there, which police officers can psychologically get to a point where they'd rather be at work, as stressful as it can be, versus rather be at home. Because at least at work, that's where the adrenaline's fired off, that's where the cohesion is, and that's where the call and the sense of purpose is. You come home to a screaming kid, and it's like I'd rather just be out there chasing criminals or something like that. It's so yeah, you got to be careful about all this stuff. But the thing
Yeah.
is, I don't think overall police are taught about this stuff and effectively. There might be some of who gets up there and reads a PowerPoint. We obviously know that's never effective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think this just needs to be more common knowledge. The same way a police officer will instinctively, through time, pick up on external risks and external threats that can present themselves, such as if someone's patting their waist when you get out with them and they're looking around and blading their body. You pick up on those instinctively, but are you picking up instinctively on what's happening at home, how you're
Yeah.
doing?
Absolutely. That's
Not
put so
necessarily.
well.
I mean, I know I
So
wasn't, and I can speak for
yeah.
many others that are going through the same thing. So anyway, that's my spiel about that.
No, absolutely. So pulling this all together, we're talking about mindset and what you can do to curb it, what you can do to be resilient and robust in your navigating the stress of the career and the job. What are some things that you want to put out to the audience and challenges, invitations that they can take on for themselves as they work on developing this mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it really changed for me whenever I had to change, and I started researching personal development, mental health. I read a book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. Now, it was written back in 2005, but the principles of it still apply to this day. And I read it because people might be thinking, wait a minute, what? I'm a cop. I'm not going to be a millionaire. Listen to me. It's about the
Not with
mindset.
that attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, right. True,
Yeah.
but it's about the mindset. I wanted to learn more about this mindset, this way of thinking, and not to say if you are not a millionaire, you have a wrong mindset. No, but anyway, the book had a phrase in there. He nailed it. Thoughts lead to feelings, and your feelings lead to actions, and your actions lead to your results. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've been going through all my life not aware of that at all. So essentially, it boils down to the numerous quotes out there about you become what you think about, or you become what you think about most of the time.
Mm.
In other words, I went through a lot of my police career like the calls that were critical, they were playing over and over again in my mind, which is all natural because your brain's trying to prepare you for the next time you encounter it or how you can prevent being in it again. Uh, like the toxicity and the negativity I face from certain people within the four walls, I would go home and think about that. Well, every time you think about something negative, guess what? You're going to feel negative. So what do
Yeah.
you do if you're in a negative state? You're going to do negative things, maybe complain, or you won't go to the gym and help your mental health by working out. All these things. So it's all about you have to be attentive and intentional on monitoring and working on essentially as Professor Seligman with the University of Pennsylvania said, you have to essentially garden your thoughts because if you don't garden your thoughts, what grows? The weeds. And I love that analogy, but just never forget what I read in Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, actions lead to results. So you have to be very careful about what you're thinking of. Now, at the same time, let me put in this disclaimer. I am not saying that positive thinking stuff. Absolutely not. If something bad happens to you, you're not supposed to say, well, I mean, you can, but I'm not on board with positive thinking all the time. If something bad happens and you're sad about it, you're a human. You're reacting to it, but you just can't stay there. And that's the
Hmm.
problem. I was when I had to resign from Canine, I was thinking about something in the past that I didn't have, and it was totally blinding me to the blessings I currently had, which was saving my marriage. Therefore, I I wasn't taking the action necessary. So when you start fostering a growth mindset and start doing things like guided meditations. Yes, I said it, guided meditations. When you
Yeah.
start doing things like yoga, when you even take deep breaths, they call it combat breathing or box breathing, all these things can help your mind get from survival mode to growth and you start thriving because you become a different person all throughout your life in the sense of growing and achieving things and ultimately feeling fulfilled and not just, well, for cops who are in it for the long haul, waiting for that magical day of retirement when I'll be happy when that happens. So that's my thing on mindset. Just be careful of what you're thinking about because it can lead to how your life is.
No, that's like 100% right. It trickles to everything. We can recognize, and maybe people roll their eyes. Oh yeah, cool. Like health is all interrelated. Yes, but like what you control, if you can work on your mind and having this growth, this abundance mindset, whatever you want to call it, right? You're removing a lot of these limitations and removing a lot of these boundaries you're putting on yourself in outlook. Like that controls literally what you do, right? You just broke it down, right? Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Like if we want results, if we want to have a better work-life balance, if we want to have a gym routine, all these things that we know are going to be helpful for our health and to thrive, we got to start with what we believe. We got to start with what we're actually going to think about and how to morph that into action, right? So I love how you explained that and presented that, and it's super simple, but oftentimes the most effective things are because it takes
Yeah.
intention and time to like really focus on that and be like, okay, cool, like what am I doing or not doing that is preventing me from getting where I want to go?
Yeah, and we got to be honest with ourselves. I mean, when I teach my course, I flash up two questions. What am I doing that's helping my health? And what am I doing that's not healthy for me? And then the third question after the first two is, are you being honest with yourself? And a lot of times we're not. We're
Yeah.
hitting the surface, but we're not really diving deep down into what really could be unhealthy or what we need to do better. Um, and that all can boil down to habits, and habits is huge because a
Hmm.
lot of what we do is out of habit. So how are your habits? But then again, if you want to develop a better habit to essentially replace a bad habit, then you have to first off think about it. So there's that thought and that clarity of it, and then you take the action from there. And I didn't. Let me go back if you don't mind, right quick
Yeah.
on meditation. I said in the very beginning, our brain seeks to conserve energy. Therefore, our brain likes what's familiar to us. So if you're doing something that's familiar, even if it's bad for you, your brain's still more inclined for you to do it because it thinks, well, this must be important to him or her. Let's keep doing it. Even if it's something bad, like I said, even if it's something bad for you. Therefore, what I found through meditation, whenever I was trying to work my way out of this year-long funk of having lost my identity because I thought I was a canine officer, I didn't know I worked as a canine officer. I started meditating about a future I wanted to create. All of a sudden, I'd get so intense with the thought that I started to feel emotions attached with that thought.
Mm.
And then eventually those same images and the same thoughts became so familiar that I found myself acting towards those visions and with the emotions attached to them because it was becoming familiar. It was crazy. And I dismissed meditation and stretching and all that for the longest time. But it's amazing when you're forced to change what you're willing to do. And I'm just trying to share the good news. You don't have to get bad. You can just, stay good and just get better.
Yeah.
And no, I recommend the being mindful of your thoughts through guided meditations, not sitting still in silence, because that's not good for first responders. We already have a very racing mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
No.
would definitely do. I would
100%.
definitely do. I would definitely do guided meditations, and I mean, it helped in my spiritual life as well. So anyway, I just had to throw that spiel out there.
No, I love it, and I think that however you want to conceptualize it, right? Like it's we've talked about it on this podcast before. Meditation and yoga. Shout out to Kendall and yoga, but it has had me one reflect on what didn't work before, which was sitting in silence, which is not like the thing, right? Like that's maybe expert like you know God mode or whatever in the video game of meditation. Monks up in the Himalayas might be doing that kind of thing, but even then, maybe not, right? They're probably thinking about a mantra or a certain theme,
Hmm.
of their an intent, and we're action oriented people. So I love how you put that, right? Our racing minds, and a lot of times we have all these thoughts to unpack. So a guided meditation that can be literally about breathing. It could be about a certain theme, right? Just rest
Yeah,
or kind of
yeah,
rehabilitation or giving yourself the space you need. Um, yeah, I love all of that, and I think it's so tangible and helping people recognize, hey, you got to start somewhere. And a lot of people, it's not going to for a physical aspect, it's not going to be just doing like a combine type workout, CrossFit. Like if you have not been moving for years, no, you start by walking, right? And you
yeah.
start by doing some simple movements, some a squat pattern, like sit down in a chair, all right, stand back up. And so meditation and working your mind can be similar, right?
Absolutely,
So super,
100%.
super
Yep.
easy, low hanging fruit. So I
Yeah.
love that, man. We covered a lot of ground, and I want to just see one, what you want to leave the listeners with, and then absolutely please share where folks can find you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, it's a very challenging time overall to be working in law enforcement. And in a sense, that's okay. I'm not excusing like the anti-police sentiment that's out there. I'm not, please hear me out. When have we ever become better because of easy times,
Mm,
whether personally or organizationally? So embrace challenge. If you're not feeling well right now, you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, loss of purpose, hopeless, then by gosh, start showing up for you with the same passion you show up on that 911 call and just keep showing up. My recent book, The Power in Showing Up, I go through the whole entire story of my experience in the Marines and law enforcement about how there were certain things where I just got knocked down flat on my back, metaphorically speaking, but uh, just hopelessness and even an addiction. But I just kept showing up. You can do the same for you. It's worth it each and every day. So make that time for you, even if it starts out with just 5 minutes. Make that time because there's a compounding effect. And even if this whole wellness thing and all that sounds so cheesy to you, I know you care about your family. I know you care about your friends. They expect and they want and they deserve you to be a better version of what you were the day before. And they want you to be there for them. But the thing is, you have to expect and you must believe. And the good thing is, you deserve to be a better version of what you were the day before. That's living. Like, that's part of being a human and growing. So don't ever sell yourself short. And if there's something bothering you, then by gosh, address it. And if that means you need to reach out to a coach or a friend or like a neurolinguistic practitioner like I did, then do it. Because on the other side of the pain is victory you never thought possible, and I am sitting here as proof of that. If I was standing, I'd say I was standing, but I'm sitting. Anyway,
I love it.
I am here as proof of that. And if anyone wants to connect with me or have me come out and speak, you can find me on my website, thescottmedlin.com. But I also have the YouTube channel and podcast called The 10 Code Mindset. And I really appreciate you having me on, Eric. I really do.
No, thank you so much. What a wealth of information. I feel grateful to have the conversation with you in this space and to be connected. And I'm excited to see what you continue to do and share in that. And I think our very clearly unified missions of just helping elevate our profession and our culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, thanks again.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.